Hi lovelies, my name is Jessica and welcome to Makeup Misfit, and today's video is the next round of Pan That Palette in Order. This was started a few years ago by Taylor Be Well. I will have her link down below, however I don't believe she's been posting for the last couple of years. And then I don't think it was last year but the year before, Caitlin Costello had this project kind of go viral a little bit. And last year, a lot more people joined in. It was really fun to watch, and I had so much fun doing this project last year. Last year was my second year doing this, but my first full year. So in 24, I tried to do this project with the Patrick Ta Major Dimensions 1 palette. I made it 2 shades in, excluding the creams, and I just wasn't really picking up on that palette. There was nothing about the palette that was gravitating towards me, pulling me in, so I decided to just kind of abandon it. Last year, I decided to retry this project, and I decided to go with something that I knew was still going to be a little bit challenging, but I also thought it was going to be a little bit more on the fun side as well. And I chose the Natasha Denona Pastel palette, knowing that I would use that as a companion and I could incorporate it into almost every and any look that I did. I had so much fun with that one. And if you guys watched me do this last year, you would see that I was coming in strong for the first little while. I was hitting like anywhere between 3 to 4 pans per update. I was absolutely loving it. Towards the end, it kind of faded off a little bit. Some of the usage was a little bit higher in certain shades than others for certain reasons. Some shades were a little bit more packed. Some were a lot more easier to use. And at the end, I ended up having 2 shades left over. So out of 15 shades in that palette, 13 of them have pan. And I am so incredibly proud of myself for working through that project, that palette for the whole year. Making that palette work for me in every way, knowing, like I said, that as a companion palette, I could pull it into almost every and any look, and I did. I absolutely loved that palette. Now, with the last 2 shades of that palette, I will, pull them into other projects to get the use on them, so that way that one palette will finally have pan in absolutely everything. But we are not going to be working on that palette this year. This year, I was tossing up a couple different ideas on what I wanted to do. Now, when I did my Panning Solitaire intro, I had mentioned that I had a palette in mind, and a few of those shades were going to match the browns that were still in the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes palette, so I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. I have since decided to put that palette off to the side, maybe work on it one day in another project, pull it into, some of my prompt-based projects just to get a couple of uses on it. But I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Now, even though this is a Pan That palette and it is in order, I did have a couple mini palettes that had pan in them, but there was still a few shades left over that I still wanted to work through and, just hit those pans. So I was ultimately deciding on pulling in a couple mini palettes, little mini 6-pan palettes, and just, in order, hitting the pans that are left in those palettes so that finally I can have these little mini 6-pan palettes with pan and everything. Let me actually go grab them just to kind of show you guys what I'm talking about. Okay, so I have these 2 little mini Essence palettes, and if you have seen me work on these before, there are plenty of pan in them, but there are still shades that need pan hit. This one has 3 shades remaining. So my idea was to pull this palette in, work on one shade, the next, and then that one, and then finally have pan in everything in this palette. And then same with the Bronze This Way palette. This one only has 2. Technically, it had 1, which was only this one. This one, I had taken a photo before I actually repressed it. I ultimately was going to just work on these 2. This one's empty, but I decided against these 2 for now. I do have a palette that I actually am really excited to start working on. It is one that I have had in my collection for a little while now, and I've only used it in a project maybe once before, and that was probably quite a few years ago at this point. I haven't reached for this palette in a very long time. And this is also a palette that I had in mind for Project Level Up. Now, if you watched that intro, you would have heard me say that there was a palette that I was considering that is a 6-pan palette, but it would be a 5-pan because one of those shades is a black and I'm not going to use it. So instead of incorporating this palette into Project Level Up and making it a little bit more complicated on trying to figure out when I needed to pull certain palettes in just to make sure that they reached the levels that they would work for. I ultimately decided to put my other idea for this project with these two little palettes off to the side for now. And I wanted to pull in this palette for this project. Now, again, it is a 6-pan palette, but we are only going to be working on 5 of the shades. And the palette that I'm going to be working on for Pan That Palette in Order 2026 is my Kaleidos Astro Pink palette. This is the Futurism 3, and I have not had very much use on this at all. Now this, let's see how I can do this here. This shade I'm not going to use, even though it's got like the sparkle in it and it's really pretty. I'm not going to use this shade at all. We are going to start off with the blue shade, and we're going to go in order because technically this is the first shade in the palette. And then I also figured that coming, you know, towards the middle of the year or whenever I'm going to reach these shades a little bit more, it'll probably be easier for me to actually reach these shades and hit pan on them than it would be for, say, this shade. Maybe even this shade. And if I can pull this into like February, March, perfect timing. So I'm really excited to start working on these ones. And this one, I don't know if you can see, but I think it's this one of these two shades. This one has a decent dip in it right there. I think you can see that. Now, like I said, I had this in a project before, and I'm pretty sure I was focusing in on this shade just to get some more use on it or whatever that goal may have been back then. So I'm really excited that this is going to be like the last shade in the palette to hit pan on. And I think that, you know, with the amount of work that's probably going to go into this one, because I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit, it's almost going to get like easier as it goes, which is kind of nice. Hoping to kind of set myself up for success that way a little bit. I really do love this shade. And like I said, for February and even March, I think that if I was to pull this shade into there, at that point, if I would manage to hit pan on here, then I'm really going to enjoy working on this one. Again, this might take me a little bit, but by the time I eventually reach this shade here, which is probably my favorite shade in the palette, it's not going to take me very much to reach for the rest of these shades and hit pan in them. Now, that is what I'm ultimately going to do, is just hit pan in each of the shades. I'm not going to try and finish them off. Maybe one day I will pick a couple of the shades in here to completely finish up and use up. Maybe that pink shimmer shade is definitely going to be one of them, and a couple of those later mattes there. But I'm really excited about this. I had been kind of wanting to work on this for the last little bit, but I couldn't really find a project or a way to pull it in that made sense for me at the time. And like I said, Project Level Up could have worked, but with making this a 5-pan palette, I would have had to make sure that it didn't go any further than level 5. And I have 2 6-pan palettes in that project that are going to come up eventually. So trying to make sure that I'm not, you know, going too far over what I'm able to actually use them for. I figured that if I put this into that project, it would have made it just a little bit more complicated. So why not pull it in for this one? It's its own, you know, star of the show here, and I'm really excited and looking forward to this one. This is the only Futurism palette that I have. I kind of wish I bought a couple of the other ones, but I'm okay with the fact that I don't have them. But I do think that I want to start to really get some use and love on this and show it the love that it deserves, because again, it's been sitting around in my collection for quite a while at this point, and I think it's time that I pull this out and get some love on it. So let's see where we are next month. I don't know if I'm going to have pan in the blue shade. However, you never know. Things have surprised me before. But I am really looking forward to it, and I'm just going to continue on and working on them and see how many pans I can have hit within the first update, the second update, that sort of thing. And if I happen to finish this off, hit pan in all of the shades rather early on in the year, if that's possible, who knows? But if that happens, say even halfway through, then depending on how I'm feeling at the time, I might pull these 2 little ones in to kind of go back to what my one plan was and finish hitting pan in the rest of these shades in this palette. I did have another palette that I wanted to pull in for this one as well, but I figured if I'm going to work on this, I want to give myself some time at the end where it's not so like stressful, and I don't want to make sure or try to make sure that I'm pulling in 3 different palettes that I have to try and hit pan on the rest of the shades in. So we'll just see how it goes, see how this year goes. I'm really excited. I think that a lot of the palettes that I have pulled in for projects, I'm excited to use, and that's, you know, the whole point of it all. Get some use on the palettes that I absolutely love. I enjoyed the palettes that I worked on last year, but sometimes it's nice to just refresh and restart with certain ones and just pull different palettes in that maybe you haven't used in a while. And that's why I like doing all of these eyeshadow projects and kind of separating the eyeshadows that I have into different categories, into which projects I want to put them into, and ultimately coming down to this one, narrowing it down to this one for this project, I think is a really good idea, and I'm really excited about it. So I hope that you guys stay tuned to check out the progress, because I'm super excited to see how it's gonna go. Again, I have the one dip on the very last shade, but I have no idea how deep these pans are. I've obviously never hit pan in them before. So if you have any of these Futurism palettes and you have hit pan in them before, let me know how long it took you, you know, that sort of thing. Let's chat about it below. And that's pretty much it. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I will see you guys all later. Bye.